I'm ready to talk about The Dark Tower. So I finished The Dark Tower books 6 and 7, so now I'm going to talk about the ending of the series. It's going to be a weird video, even weirder than normal. So I just read books 6 and 7 of The Dark Tower this month, so I'm going to go in and talk about both of those books, and then I'm going to discuss the series as a whole at the end. There will be spoilers in this. I don't think it's possible to talk about these last two books without including any spoilers. I don't imagine a lot of people are watching this video about recommendations for the 6th and 7th books in a series, so I'm not too worried about it. Here we go. Book 6 was Song of Susannah. This is one of the shorter books in the series. In this one, Susannah and Mia have escaped to somewhere with Black 13 to go and have the baby. I'm just going to tell you they escaped to New York City in 1999. So that's where they spend most of, actually all the book, I think. Also in New York City at that time are Jake and Callahan and Oy, as they are sent there from the cave doorway place by the Manny. And so they are searching for Susannah for most of the book. And then Roland and Eddie go to Maine in 1978, I believe, to finish up the stuff with Calvin Tower and the lot. And then, spoiler alert, they also go and see Stephen King. So what did I like about this book? I kind of liked all the plot lines and all the sequence of events that happened in the book. All the places that the characters went and all the things that they did all made sense. It was all very engaging, I wouldn't say action-packed, but very concise. I found it very engaging. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of extra stuff in here. One of the issues I have with all of the Dark Tower books, or most of them, is that there's a lot of rambling, a lot of stuff that doesn't really need to be quite as long as it is. And so it kind of takes me out of the story for a while. But I don't remember any of that stuff being in this book, so I did appreciate that. And as usual with all the other books in the series, it's got the usual charm of all the characters and settings. And there's also some new characters that are introduced as well. We spend a lot of the time in the book with Mia and Susannah, getting to know Mia more as a character, getting to understand her motivation to have this baby, and some more history and stuff like that. And we also see some distant places that we have not heard of before, some more mid-world things, or end-world, or whatever you want to call it. So that will be expanded out more in book 7, but we get a first glimpse of it here. And I did really enjoy getting to spend some time with Mia, getting to know her. I also enjoyed the stuff in Maine. There are some great action sequences, some enjoyable, lots of humorous parts, some great new characters, and then the meta stuff with them going to see the author of the series was also very well done, I thought. I may not enjoy the plot line as much, or whatever, but I do think it was executed very well. I think it ties in with the overall story of the series fairly well. With Stephen King authoring the Dark Tower series, then kind of losing track of it later on as the books progress, and then just getting the feeling that the books have become bigger than he intended, and he doesn't feel that he can live up to the expectations of it. He also raises some questions about, did he write the story, or is he just killing the story through something that was told to him, or something that is inhabiting him and his talents, or whatever. So it may not be my favorite plotline, but I think it is executed very well, and leads to some nice moments. And as for the last part of our quartet, there was not a lot of them. We didn't see very much of Jake and Oy and Callahan. I think really just one one little section they appear at near the end. But it kind of primes us for the beginning of book 7. And the stuff we did get from them was very enjoyable as well, as they enter New York City. I think the overall ending is very, very well done. I think both the endings for Susannah and Mia, and also for the other 3 I just mentioned, all kind of lead straight into the Dark Tower. So that makes it an easy transition when you're starting book 7. So I really enjoyed the ending, I think. It's also a very weird structured book. It's got stanzas instead of chapters, which goes along with the theme of the Song of Susannah, which I think is pretty good, pretty interesting. I think an argument could be made that this book could have been split between books 5 and 7, because there's not a whole lot of plot progression that goes on. I think that is valid. I think it could split off into book 7 and split that book into maybe 2 books by itself or something. I don't know. There's a lot of ways it could go, but I think it's fine the way it is. It is, yeah. It's Ka. Anyways, one of the few things I didn't like about the book was there was some weird stuff with the Twin Towers and 9/11. That was kind of weird. I wouldn't say it offended me or anything, or it was in bad taste, but it just kind of left me with a bad taste in my mouth. And there's also the epilogue, or I think it was called the coda, where it's just a lot of journal entries from Stephen King throughout the years as he writes the Dark Tower books. I found those very fascinating as well, very entertaining. Then it gets to the end where he dies after being hit by a car. So that is leading into book 7. But overall, it's a pretty good book. Far from my favorite of the series, but I didn't hate it either. So, anyways, book 7 is The Dark Tower. And even before the story starts, you get those preface quotes that are in most, if not all, of the books in the series. And even those are starting to set the tone for the book. I especially like the excerpt from the Children into the Dark Tower Came poem. I think that was very much a mood setter. A very nice choice to include. I'd say overall the issues for book 7 are pacing and payoff. The pacing is not consistent, as you could say about the entire series, but in book 7 there are some high moments, and then there's a lot of really low moments where things drag for quite a long time. That's one issue I had with them. The other one is payoff. You know, another thing that could be said of the entire series is that oftentimes the payoff to things that are anticipated or built up is not as strong as it could be. And that definitely happens again in this book on multiple occasions. But getting into the book itself, kind of a blow by blow, but not really. Just kind of some points I wanted to point out. The stuff with Callahan and the Dixie Pig and Jake in the beginning was really well done. I enjoyed all that. Them facing off against the low men and the vampires and whatever else was in there. It was all well done and engaging, and I liked it. So then Callahan shoots himself before the vampires can get to him. It's a fitting end, I think. And even though we didn't really get too much from Callahan, I think he played his part very well. And especially if you read Salem's Lot, I think it's a nice ending for his story. And we get to the baby, which is Mordred. And immediately after being born, he becomes one of the creepiest things ever. Giant spider baby. Yeah, he has some very disturbing scenes in this book, which makes him a very creepy villain. But he also has some very human moments as well, as he experiences a lot of isolation and a lot of abandonment. It's all kind of sad, really. But he's also a giant spider that eats eyeballs, so you can't let your guard down too much. And piggybacking off of that, the death of Randall Flagg, or Walter, or the Man in Black, or however he is going by, was again a very creepy scene. as he meets Mordred, and then it dies. I enjoyed it though. I don't really have any sort of attachments to this character. I've only read him in this series and also in The Eyes of the Dragon. So if he's, I know he's a big character in The Stand, but I haven't read that yet, so I don't have any particular affiliation with him. So I thought his ending here was quite well done. He didn't really have a clear purpose in the story after a certain point, so I don't see the need for him to, go on after this. He certainly was not going to have a giant gunfight with Roland or anyone after that at the end, because that's just not the way that he plays things. So I'm really not sure where he would have gone after this. And then we move into the stuff in Algo Ciento. I think this section was a mixed bag. There is some really great stuff here. And there's also a couple chapters that really dragged on as well. There's one in particular that takes us into the viewpoint of a couple of the villains, which while it did give them more character, it was ultimately pointless, and I didn't really enjoy it while I was reading it, so those are my least favorite chapters in the book. But there is some fun stuff in this section. We have the Kata meeting up with Ted Brodigan and Shimi and another guy who I forgot. So that's good. That's fun. I haven't read Hearts in Atlantis yet, so I don't know much about Ted Brodigan other than what I've heard. But I enjoyed that. I also enjoyed the sections with them in the cave as they all experience the sense of kashumi, whatever that word is. It sounds like a Chinese food. But that was a good chapter. And also the mention that Mordred was just standing outside on the top of the cave or whatever, watching the whole time, was also another one of his creepy adventures. Then we have the inevitable showdown as they set fire to the Devertois, that place with the breakers. And then we have Eddie is the first one of the group to die. So that was sad. It didn't affect me all that much. I like Eddie. He's not my favorite, but I do like all of them. So it was sad to see the group, the Kata, break. And then we move into the next section, which I think is my favorite section of the book. It's very heartbreaking, but it's also very well written and beautiful and entertaining. So Roland and Jake and Oi are in Maine to save Stephen King. And so it's a very tense couple of scenes as they race to the countryside or whatever, where he's having his walk. And then Jake dies saving him, which was kind of a big moment. I think that one hit me more than Eddie did, especially Oi's reaction and Roland's reaction to it was especially heartbreaking. They did eventually save the writer from his fate, so we get some more good scenes with him and Roland as they discuss, his future and whatnot. And then move on to eventually Roland going to New York and visiting the Tet Corporation Tower, which I really enjoyed as well. You get to see Moses Carver and his daughter and Aaron Deepnow's niece, I think. That was fun having Roland interact with them for that chapter. And then the rest of the book kind of dragged on, I thought. There were some interesting points, but overall there's a lot of journeying with Roland and Susannah and Oi, and then eventually Patrick Danville. I think Patrick was an interesting character. I have not read Insomnia, so I don't have any prior experience with him. But I did enjoy the concept of him. I think he should have been introduced earlier. he would have had a bigger part to play. Then his scenes at the end might have been a little more logical, I think. As well, I think the whole Dandelo stuff seemed out of place. I think that all should have been somewhere earlier in the story. And they did seem to make a big deal out of Dandelo before they even arrived there. So while I did enjoy the character and the situation that they had there, the reveal that Dandelo was just a clown thing, that's kind of disappointing. Then we had some more meta stuff with Stephen King being the one to save them, kind of, which I don't love that idea, but it is what it is. So then we get Patrick to come along with the group for the last leg of the journey, and then we settle with Mordred. Yeah, this was a tough one, a tough chapter. One that I kind of saw coming. He kills Oi as he tries to get to Roland. But I thought it was a fine enough ending for the old Billy Bumbler. And then Mordred just killed instantly. So that seemed kind of quick. There was not a lot of meat to his story, other than just following the group and then dying. So I don't know how I feel about that. I think there should have been something more there, but just another thing that happens. Oh, actually before that we had Susannah leaving too, so whatever. She just noped out and went to New York City. And met some alternate versions of Eddie and Jake, which is, I don't know. I don't really feel too attached to that storyline. I don't fault the character for doing that, as she really had no desire to see the tower. So her taking a chance to leave it behind, I think it makes sense. But also I don't feel a lot of sympathy for her as well, so it's just kind of whatever. And then we get to the ending. We actually reach the tower, we see the Crimson King, who is just Santa Claus apparently, just laughing away from his balcony thing. I thought he was pretty goofy. I didn't connect with him at all. Not my favorite scene. Then you have Patrick using his abilities to erase the Crimson King, so whatever that means. That's basically the end of the main story. I didn't particularly care for the final confrontation. It seemed like a mid-tier boss battle from a video game. But whatever. It is what it is, just like everything is and stuff. And then we get the ending with Susannah in New York, which I said already was whatever. I don't care. And then we get the final ending with Roland, which I actually kind of like. It may be disappointing that he just ends up at the beginning of the story, at the end. But I think it makes sense. I do like the idea that he's been on this journey multiple times and he just cannot seem to get it right. He always, sacrifices the people that he is with, or makes some kind of fatal flaw that causes him to be stuck in this loop. Sonny's always going back and playing the journey, drawing maybe different people or maybe the same people each time. So I think it's kind of like a game of cards or a video game, just replaying it constantly with different pieces. But I found that ending very fitting. And so ultimately the ending, kind of a metaphor for life or addiction or even just the creative process in certain ways. And that you have this ending place, this dark tower, or this thing, this ultimate goal that you want to reach. But in the end, it's really not about that end goal at all. It's more about the journey as it is. It's very cliche, but it's really about the journey there and not the thing at the end of the road. And the idea that Roland is constantly being sent to this loop till he gets it right kind of speaks to me of hope and redemption, that he gets second chances to replay this journey. And at the end, he does find the horn, so it leads you to believe that he may get it right. If not this time, then sometime soon. So I do quite like that idea as well. As for the series as a whole, I really enjoyed it. Like the final entry, most of the books suffered a lot from pacing and payoff issues, things going a lot quicker than they should have in some places, and things dragging out far too long in other places, in many places, I think. And also the payoff to certain events not being all that fulfilling in multiple times. So I think those are the main two things that plagued the series as a whole. But overall, it had some really intriguing concepts, and it built up a very unique world. You never really understand completely, which I'm fine with as well. There are a bunch of great characters that you get to know, and lots of authentic locations. I still think that The Wasteland is my favorite book of the series. It's just such a rich book, and it's full of adventure and fantasy elements and lots of great moments, from learning about the beams to getting reintroduced to Jake and then pulling him into Midworld and then meeting Oi and all the stuff with Charlie Choo Choo and Blaine and going to Lud and seeing the survivors there that are barely hanging on, and then blowing Lud up, and all that kind of stuff. I think it's just the most fun entry in the series, one that I seem to recall the most vividly, enjoying more than any other book in the series. As for my least favorites, I would say it's kind of a tie between The Gunslinger and Song of Susannah. I actually did read The Gunslinger again this past weekend, and I enjoyed it a little more than the first time. So the first time I read it, I don't remember a whole lot, but I enjoyed the atmosphere and the prose of setting the scene. But other than that, it was just kind of a okay book. This time around, I did enjoy it somewhat more. I had a better sense of what was going on, even though the entire book just felt kind of odd and dreamlike and kind of surreal, with all this disconnected dialogue and these weird things that just kind of happen nonchalantly. But it's a very interesting book in its own right. I especially think the first couple of chapters or parts were more interesting than the latter half of the book. The stuff in Toll and then the way station, meeting Jake, was very interesting. Then the later stuff was kind of boring, as it's mostly Jake and Roland just kind of walking around a lot. And as it is, the version of the book that I have read is the original version. So at some point I do want to go back and read the revised version of The Gunslinger to see what kind of changes were made to tie that more into the rest of the series. And also I do want to go back and read The Wind Through the Keyhole at some point too, as well as the supporting short stories and then the companion books, or whatever you want to call them, like Insomnia and Black House and whatever other ones there are. Yeah, so overall I did like the Dark Tower very well. I haven't read a whole lot of fantasy yet, so I cannot compare it to a whole lot. But as of now, it's one of my top 2 fantasy series of all time. So, yeah, it was a long, crazy journey. Much like Stephen King, I started it and then I kind of stopped for a while before I picked it back up. I started The Gunslinger in 2018, and I was kind of lukewarm about it. Then I started The Drawing of the Three, and I didn't really get into it for whatever reason. So I kind of put that on the shelf for a while, but then I picked that back up earlier this year and finished it and really enjoyed it. And then obviously finished the rest of the series and really enjoyed it. So it was definitely a time. It was a lot of weird stuff, a lot of great characters, a lot of funny quotes, a lot of references to older books, lots of evil trains and robots, a lot of weird dialogue, a whole lot of fun. So it's a series that never really conformed to any preconceived notions about fantasy or anything like that. It's something completely different and unique, which I admire it for. And although I wish the trajectory of the last 3 or 4 books were different than they ended up being, they are what they are, and I enjoyed them for what they are well enough. So I'm fine with that. You know, it's Ka, baby. So, anyways, that was my journey to the Dark Tower. I say thank you for watching, and then we went.